Well, this is what I get for trying to dare people into doing something. Hi there, I'm Kamen. This is apparently part 2 of a series of videos where I'm debunking a certain video that came out last year, talking about Persona 5, Cvit's Persona 5 style over substance.
If you're a real good player, meaning you've got the skill of a 9 or 10-year-old, you can even try to jump your car.
The first video was giving a general overview of my issues with his video as a whole, as well as trends that were video that I noticed. And yet... didn't stop the Hornets from piping up, trying to tell me that I was wrong, how I didn't understand how Persona 5 was a bad game, that apparently I hate long-form content, that my points were nitpicked on Cvit, and will claim me to be a fanboy of Persona 5 who can't stand seeing criticism of the game, and will claim that I'm just cherry-picking his points, despite the fact that I'm also saying that his video isn't entirely... Gee, it's almost like I called that in my video and people didn't actually watch it. No, today we're talking about a specific segment in his overly bloated analysis. And that's the battle system, or combat as he talks about it. Well, I say that, but before I actually get to the 12-minute segment, there's something I need to point out about his analysis that...
No, there was no way to break it down even more, because we're condensing all 100 hours of this game into 4. If I'm going to critique the game that everyone seems to love, then I'm gonna go all the way with it. Today we'll be looking at every part of Persona 5.
Talk about false advertising. Funnily enough, Cvit doesn't go over everything in the battle system in this segment. And while I'm probably going to bring this up in the video, I think it's important for me to list out what he didn't so you have an idea on what he missed. Bam, son. Pause if you'd like, because I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, because I'm already on page 2 of the script and I'd like to get started before people start typing up their essays on why I'm a blundering idiot. Joke's on you, I was an idiot the whole time.
One of the biggest frustrations when it comes to combat is the fact that the game will end no matter what when Joker dies in battle. While still incredibly annoying, it was more understandable when you couldn't even control your party in Persona 3, or when you were with demons in contractual relationships in Nocturne. But there is no logical reason for this feature to be in the game, other than that's how it's always been done.
Really? There's no logical reason? I love how Cvit actively ignores the fact that you, the player, are Joker. You are the main character. If you faint, you don't know how the rest of the battle is. Not to mention the narrative where Joker is basically, you know, messing up his own story in this regards. Remember, throughout most of the game, Joker is talking to Sai Nejima about this whole thing. If he blacks out, he pretty much does lose this entire game.
The key to victory lies within the memories of your bonds, the truth that you and your friends grasped. It all began that day, when the game was started half a year ago. For the sake of your world's future, as well as your own, you must remember.
Chunk is up to own personal interpretation, but from Lavenza's lines right there, it seems to me that if Joker fails to remember it correctly, then it's game over for him. So naturally, if he actually faints, then he can't be remembering correctly. Again, this is my own interpretation, but it just baffles me that Cvit doesn't even consider this, considering, you know, the game pretty much tells you this right now, that the key to victory is to remember. Even then, player frustration, I really have to question that. Not only is this speaking up for other players, which goes against the notion of this being an opinion piece when you start bringing up the ability to speak for other people. Hey everybody, I'm Cvit, and I'm going to be talking for everybody. Oh boy, that's going to be going well. This also ignores the fact that Joker isn't like the other characters in the game. He's pretty OP in compared to the rest of the cast with the ability to swap out his personas. That includes swapping out things like weaknesses, resistances, persona stats, skills, spells, hell, even the boost to Joker's stats.
That's outrageous.
And it doesn't cost a turn to do that, by the way. If you remove this mechanic, then you'd have to find another way to compensate for such a powerful character, either by severely limiting his abilities or making the enemies a lot tougher in order to make that balance. Really, I'm not saying you can't hate this, but you have to look at it on a balancing aspect. Cvit doesn't do.
I see a simple compromise in this, being if you're unable to revive Joker by the end of a battle, then you get the game over. I don't see a particular reason why the game should end instantly if you have multiple revive items and revive moves even early on. Maybe the game could give you an instant game over if you have none of those options, just so you don't waste time. Or you can just have it play out like it does in SMT4. If Flynn gets knocked out and you don't revive him by the end of battle, once you get to the overworld, he'll be left with 1 HP and you could heal him. They already do this with other party members in your group in Persona 5, so I don't see why you have to be the exception. This is
ignoring the fact that being able to revive Joker is kind of a means of breaking the combat system that I alluded to, but let's give a small example here. Let's say Joker dies. He gets resurrected by Skull and then healed to max by Morgana. Death completely negated. Not to mention, Joker can now attack the enemy's weaknesses at the end of the turn and annihilate them completely. In other Shin Megami Tensei games, there are no all-out attacks, and there's another reason why the game doesn't end when the MC dies. They are not as crucial to the party as the MCs of Persona 3, 4, and 5. You could say they could just take out the all-out attacks from the game, but then they become the staple of the Persona series since Persona 3. It adds a new mechanic to the game that the other Shin Megami Tensei titles didn't have. Adding the one more mechanic to this, hitting enemy weaknesses are much deadlier towards them than the other games. It's a balancing act in game design. The MC dies, it equates to a game over. Even then, I'd argue if you're complaining about dying as Joker, then that's really as you as the player of the game, not the game itself. Persona 5, while not perfect, does give the player some tools in order to combat this. Stuff like planning out what personas you'll use in each dungeon, to the equipment, even making sure your party has the required skills to help out through their social links.
How it's always been is not a good enough answer for a major source of player frustration.
Cvit, please, for the love, just say it's an opinion and not fact. Don't use encompassing language, please. You're gonna make my head explode.
You have full control of your party members, and somehow if Ryuji falls over dead, it's okay to use a revival bead on him, but the game doesn't even allow you to revive Joker. Each party member gains the ability to withstand an attack with 1 HP remaining at their rank 8 Confidant, but Joker only gets the same ability from some of the late game personas as a skill, which takes up a slot on the persona, and said persona needs to be equipped for the ability to even trigger. This mechanic only creates frustration, and it mostly happens during boss fights when they have massive damage abilities that can 100 to 0 you and make you have to redo the entire fight.
There's a fine art of finality in his voice. Like, there's no reason for this, when there's a good reason to include this. Balancing. Don't take this to mean that I think it can't be annoying. It can be, potentially. But again, Cvit just puts this on the table and expects me to eat this without any other possibility there.
Well, that ain't gonna work.
Because a holy or death insta-kill ability from an enemy lands. Speaking of which, why are those abilities even in the game to begin with? No player is ever gonna use them opposed to regular damaging abilities of the same attribute, because they don't work on important enemies like bosses, and they cost too much mana for a low chance insta-kill to waste on trash mobs.
Much later.
The SP Adhesive 3 can be acquired pretty early on for only 50k, and this completely breaks the battle system with being able to spam spells non-stop, and they cost too much mana being able to spam spells non-stop.
I fail to see the logic here.
While this isn't a straight-up contradiction, I find it to be a bit of an odd complaint, especially considering the fact the SP adhesive, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to why this is actually a complaint when you yourself admit that this could easily be spammable. Don't get me wrong, I'm not disagreeing that the skills aren't perfect, but it's just a weird thing to bring up in this review if you ask me. Again with this language, trying to tell me that this is how players play the game when these are just the options for a player, and Cvit can only speak for himself.
Because they don't work on important enemies like bosses, and they cost too much mana.
Wait, what? Mana? What? It's SP, ya fool! Again, I don't even see why this is a complaint. It's just giving you the player options. This also ignores the fact the game also gives you the option to boost the abilities, which actually gives you a chance to improve the ability to use these skills successfully. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not defending the skills. I don't use them myself, mainly because I find them to be a waste, and I agree with Cvit that they can be costly with the MP. Damn it, he got me doing it too! Damn it! However, one of Cvit's reasons for his broken team dynamic later on relies on percentage luck in order to justify his choice in the party makeup, and I find it a bit double standard-like to rely on skills that involve luck but then berate skills that are on the same mechanic.
At the same time, when an enemy uses an insta-kill ability, the only thing the player can do is pray to God that it doesn't target Joker, and if it does, it doesn't kill him. There is no meaningful interaction with the game's systems when this happens. So all this does is force you to carry a death or holy resistant persona the next time you go through that area, or be faced with the threat of possibly having another coin flip death again.
And there we go. That's the only thing you can do, huh? Not only, Cvit, do you shoot yourself in the foot with this by instantly contradicting yourself with the Persona example, but you're not even right. The game does give you items and skills that can actually prevent this. Stuff like the Homunculus, which, by the way, you can buy from Tai Takemi's shop when you max out her Confidant, or you can find them in Mementos. Then there's the skills you can learn. Tetraraja can be used to put up a barrier to negate instant death skills. The Macarena can be used to put up a barrier and actually reflects any magical attacks, save for Almighty, back at your enemy. Then there's the item's Magic Ointment. which you can get from Tied to Kemi again, that can reflect a spell back on one character. So I'm sorry, but I don't buy that you can't plan for this stuff when the game gives you options. Not a lot of options, I get you, but then again, not a lot of enemies run these skills themselves.
I want to take a moment here to tangent about how terrible these insta-kill abilities are.
No, thank you, Cvit. I am skipping this portion because this adds nothing to the actual criticism of Persona 5 and is just a cheap way for Cvit to actually make the instant death kill abilities worse by citing a boss fight from a completely different game. I get that this is a tangent, but it doesn't actually support your point since this kind of fight doesn't happen in Persona 5.
The battle system in general also heavily favors physical attacks, since magic costs MP, which is non-recoverable without items, which are pretty scarce in the early game and become completely invalidated by the late game. While even incredibly strong physical attacks only cost HP, which can easily be replenished with healing items, which there are an overabundance of, or healing spells. While most enemies have a mix of magic resistances and weaknesses, there's only a few in the entire game that are resist or reflect to physical attacks.
I still got an issue with him saying that there's a leaning towards physical attacks, mainly because unless you get lucky, you're not going to be able to knock down enemies with the physical attacks. And it's because of this dependence on physical attacks, we get the dumbest of team formations. But the biggest issue I have right this section is the percentages, which Cvit is really downplaying. Yeah, only 19% of the common enemies have weaknesses. Yeah, only 19% of common enemies can actually be strong against physical attacks, but this is completely ignoring the fact that most other enemies are not weak to them. You don't even bring this up. In addition, he doesn't really tell you when you face these enemies and in which palaces. For example, a good chunk of Okumura's palace shadows are strong and repel physical damage, and he uses this later in Okumura's palace to complain.
Some of the personas here are only weak to light.
Oh, you mean the only one that's just weak to light? I know this is the wrong section, but
An element only Joker can have, or Psi and Nuclear, which is what Haru and Makoto would usually cover, but they need to be the healing batteries for the party. So I hope you have the SP Adhesive 3 because Joker's gonna be wasting a lot of fucking mana down half of these enemies.
Dude, it's your fault that you think that just because physical skills are better that you're willing to make Haru and Makoto be healing batteries, which... What? I know this is a slip of the tongue with Haru because I'm sure he's referring to An in this, but it's still kind of jarring nonetheless, since Haru doesn't have any actual healing abilities.
Even characters with high magic stats are better off just using physical attacks, conserving MP for knockdowns, and fighting bosses. In most instances, physical attacks just do more damage, they deal better numbers. And this is a numbers game. At the end of the day, the most important thing is making your opponent's health bar 0.
Wait. Stop right there. You're at level 90 at Shido's Palace. Typically, the enemies in Shido's Palace are around 63 to 65. Well, I can see someone abuse the Reaper technique. No wonder you're putting out so much damage. You're way over-leveled for these enemies. At this point, you could use any party member to dish out crazy amounts of damage, and I don't find that to be actually strengthening your argument. If anything, I find it rather dishonest that you're using footage to justify your point about physical attacks, when you're just powering through everything. I could easily make the same case for magical attacks being overpowered, and by your own admission, the cost of spells is basically moot by a late game, so I'd understand why you think that spells aren't viable options. You're brute forcing your way through the combat with the same team because you think there's an objective good team. However, by being insanely over-leveled at this point in the game, you're not giving a good representation and having out accurate damage numbers to illustrate your point. Also, like I said, any team can be viable if you're over-leveled enough. That's kind of the curse of RPGs, Cvit. Actually, and I know I'm going a little ahead on this, why exactly do we need dedicated healing batteries for this? Didn't you say this earlier in the video?
While even incredibly strong physical attacks only cost HP, which can easily be replenished with healing items, which there are an overabundance of.
If you've got a surplus of magical items that can heal your HP, doesn't that kind of go against the notion that you need to have characters be healing batteries? I understand wanting to preserve SP, but I really don't understand this, and I'm going to go into more why this is a really confusing and befuddling idea, but why is this even a point?
Because of the game's bias towards physical damage, the strongest party for almost every battle consists of Ryuji, who's the only character who can learn charge and has incredibly strong AoE physical attacks, Yusuke, whose single target physical attacks gain damage with each baton pass, a core mechanic of the combat of this game, and finally Morgana, who works as both a healing machine and all-around generalized knockdowns using Lucky and Miracle Punch. There's almost no reason to use the other characters in battle, since Ann and Makoto have both near identical movesets, only their main difference stemming from their elements, which can easily be covered by Joker, and they need to already act as healing batteries for long palace runs, since you could use them to heal party members when out of combat, even if they're not selected to be the 4 that you're running the dungeon with. Haru comes so late into the game that she has none of the confidant perks like baton pass, withstanding damage, status recovery, so she is strictly just a worse character until you max her out, which most people won't do because she's introduced with less than 2 months left in the game. Most players are going to feel more obligated to actually finishing links that they started rather than beginning another one and ignoring people that they're close to maxing out. These issues are the core of the combat system, but there's also some minor gripes I have with it. The guns that are a core part of each character's design and personality have limited ammo and barely do damage, so they are relegated to being used only to farm knockdowns on the select few enemies that are weak to it. There's never a reason to ever waste money on upgrades or newer guns, because at most you're just gonna shoot an enemy once and then baton pass to one of your other characters like Yusuke or Ryuji. The game does do some interesting stuff with the guns, with the perks you gain from the Tower Confidant, like Bullet Hail, Warning Shot, Electric Slug, and Oda Special, but at the end of the day, they still aren't very good and you never find yourself ever using them. Hopefully in the Royal or in future Persona games, if this mechanic gets brought back, they'll do something more with it, because once you get a Persona with bullet damage physical attacks, there's never a reason to use the gun.
And there it is! The team dynamic. So let's start with Morgana and how Cvit's team composition is pretty terrible considering the credentials and how he doesn't go over any of the character's stats. Let's start with Morgana. For the fact that Cvit is using Lucky and Miracle Punch, literally that's the only thing that's better than Makoto, and it's not even a guaranteed critical. You're essentially relying on luck, which admittedly Morgana has high luck, but you know what Morgana doesn't have? Good defense and endurance. Yeah, chalk this up to something that Cvit doesn't bring up either, but he doesn't bring up defensive aspects in combat, nor does he bring up speed. If we're to compare Morgana to Makoto, Makoto is actually faster than Morgana, and has a lot better defenses and endurance. Morgana is one of the easiest characters to have to feint in battle. He's also got the second weakest physical attack stat of the party, and he doesn't learn any severe or higher up attack skills. Also, there's no mention of technical hits. I just realized that's another thing he doesn't bring up. For Yusuke, yeah, he's got good stats in AoE, but his weakness is doesn't get a lot of good stat buffs or boost skills, something that other party members get. I'll go more into this later since he glosses over the ladies in this respect, but needless to say, I have a lot of issues with his team makeup. Ryuji's fine though, he's a boss.
There's almost no reason to use the other characters in battle, since Ann and Makoto have both near identical movesets, only their main difference stemming from their elements, which can easily be covered by Joker.
And, you know, their stats. I already stated that Makoto is a faster, tankier version of Morgana, but he also ignores the skills that can remove buffs from your opponents or how Makoto can buff your own party's defenses. That's never brought up. Meanwhile, Ann? Not only does she have the best magic stat in the entire game, but she has the spell version of Charge, Concentrate, which can make her spells even deadlier. Also, Cvit ignores the fact that Ann is a character that can also inflict status moves, such as Confusion or Burn. I love how that Cvit doesn't bring up anything such as status effects that can change the battle, such as Confusion, which can get your enemies to give you money. Or in Ann's case, the Burn effect, which can inflict damage to enemies at the end of their turn and open them up for technical damage from wind and nuclear attacks. And by the way, thanks to her high luck, she's got a better chance of inflicting status effects on enemies. Also, the easily covered by Joker line, yeah, that can apply to every party member. It's not like the point of Persona 5's battle system that thanks to the wild card you can change your team dynamic. This is just basically him trying to give an excuse as to why you wouldn't use either of these two, just so he can peddle this numbers game.
Nobody said they'd be mad!
And they need to already act as healing batteries for long palace runs, since you could use them to heal party members when out of combat, even if they're not selected to be the 4 that you're running the dungeon with. While even incredibly strong physical attacks only cost HP, which can easily be replenished with healing items, which there are an overabundance of.
Couldn't that also be applied to Morgana? I don't see why you need a squishy cat on the team when he can be just as effective as a healing battery.
Haru comes so late into the game that she has none of the confidant perks like baton pass, withstanding damage, status recovery, so she is strictly just a worse character until you max her out, which most people won't do because she's introduced with less than 2 months left in the game. Most players are going to feel more obligated to actually finishing links that they started rather than beginning another one.
Go outside, so beautiful!
You know, I just love how Cvit handwaves away Haru simply because of the confidant portion, not even bothering to actually tackle her as a party member. Then the fact he uses the most players thing again. Like, dude, really? Most players aren't going to be 30 levels over at Shido's Palace unless they really want to do the Reaper's trick over and over again. Anyway, for Haru, it's kind of funny, because not only does Haru have a better knockdown technique with a high crit chance, one-shot kill, she also gets it boosted thanks to Snipe and Cripple, which can stack and give her gun attacks a 75% boost. That can also apply to Triple Down, which, while not the best skill, gives her great AoE since with that 75% boost, she can hit all enemies 3 times with her gun skill. She also has that Reflect Magic spell that I brought up earlier. The Makarema Raka. Yeah, don't even bother trying to tell me I'm mispronouncing it, I don't care at this point. But yeah, Cvit doesn't bring up any of this. Honestly, it seems to me like Cvit just glossed over the girls just so he can solidify his idea of the objectively good team when he outright ignores that there are numbers that go against his ideas.
Because once you get a persona with bullet damage physical attacks, there's never a reason to use
You mean like Haru?
the gun. The SP Adhesive 3 can be acquired pretty early on for only 50k. And this completely breaks the battle system with being able to spam spells non-stop all game, completely trivializing all dungeons because of infinite healing.
First off, why can't the same be applied to magic users? Why can't we spam spells that Ann and Makoto use? Why are they just regulated healing batteries while Morgana isn't? Because of the crit chance that he may not be able to pull off? Also, the SP adhesive only works while the character's in battle, meaning your batteries are gonna run out eventually. Not to mention, I still find this to be a contradiction to his declaration of physical attacks being dominant when you have something that can give you infinite SP by his own words, and thus, spam spells.
Hifumi's rank 10 perk that lets you swap characters in the middle of combat is mostly useless because it takes up a turn, unlike other JRPGs like Final Fantasy X, where you'd have instant control of them. So when you swap a character, you have 3 entire turns before they get to go, which is usually more than enough time to kill whatever enemy you're fighting unless it's a boss. And with what I mentioned earlier, there's no reason to ever swap to any of the other party members once you have Yusuke, because you already have the best team the game is going to have.
Obviously, this movie has its head up its own, ain't it?
Oh no, this game's mechanics aren't the same as this other game's mechanics, even though Final Fantasy X's battle system had the party change system be a key component ever since the beginning, and one could easily say that this is a bit of a broken system. After all, if you can change your party members without any cost in order to have the best team out for the situation, can be quite broken. I'm going to step away from Persona and Final Fantasy to give an example from Pokemon, as the best example because it allows you to do both. You can switch your current party member at any time in order to have a better suited Pokemon at the cost of a turn and giving your opponent a free turn. Or when you make your opponent's Pokemon faint, you can switch without cost, which can make the battles extremely easy. To me, it's like it's an issue of balancing, and more of a preference, really.
Rush mode only speeds up the attack animations of allies. Any enemy animations are played out normally during rush mode, so incredibly long animations you just have to sit through, like Kamoshida's lustful sip.
Oh no, the cinematic boss fight is being cinematic. Also, I timed this at 17 seconds. I feel like you are over-exaggerating with this, Cvit.
Status elements on your teammates also count, so anytime an enemy charms or enrages your teammate, the rush mode becomes completely useless. You just have speed lines on the top and bottom to create the illusion that combat is going faster, but this doesn't speed up the overall time of battles at all.
I don't see how this is a complaint. Your party's been inflicted with a status ailment. The game is giving you a chance to get them healed up because some status ailments, like despair, can kill party members after a certain number of turns, or brainwashing, which can have your characters attack each other. If you rush through that, you can end up killing your own party. So yeah, they give you a chance to actually recover that before you go insane and go, "Oh, I lost!"
The interrogation trigger is very inconsistent, since you can knock down an enemy, kill a different enemy, and then at times, even though there's only one enemy left, it will not trigger an interrogation. I was unable to discern what made the difference between times it did and times it didn't.
Oh my god. This was part of the reason why I wanted to do this entire video. It's that Cvit doesn't really understand how the hold-up mechanic works. The hold-up mechanic works based on knockdowns. Any attack that would cause a knockdown, a weakness, critical hit, or inactivates the one more follow-up when other enemies are down, triggers the hold-up. This isn't a fault of the game, but yours for not understanding the mechanics the game gave you. This isn't a fault of the game, but yours for not understanding the mechanics of an 80-hour gameplay. Which, you know, they gave you a tutorial at the beginning of the game. This is basically him not bothering to actually pay attention to the game. Heck, let's take a look at his examples. You have Joker, after getting the bonus attack, go and just kill Jack Frost with a regular attack that doesn't do any special damage. That will not cause a holdup, because you're not using a super effective move against him. Is it that hard to discern? Even your own footage gives you a clear reason why the interrogation didn't work and when it did.
Persona 5's combat does very little to keep things fresh, with almost no change to how combat encounters and tactics work throughout the game.
I mean, you're using the same 4 party members every time. Surely that can't be a reason for this!
Admittedly, turn-based combat in JRPGs is a hard formula to innovate completely on, but many games in the genre have managed to do it. Final Fantasy X has the sphere grid allowing you to customize your characters, and summons being earned throughout the entire game. Final Fantasy XIII has the paradigm shift mechanic. Bravely Default and Bravely Second allow each of the 4 party members to be any job in the game, creating hundreds of possible combinations for your party. Even classics like Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII have the materia and junction systems respectively.
Or, you know, the gun abilities, the tentacle shots, the buffs, the debuffs, status effects. You know, all the things you don't bother to bring up. I know I said this before in my previous video, but just because the system doesn't do anything new, that doesn't mean it's a bad system. Lack of innovation does not mean it's a bad thing. Innovation can be good, but that doesn't mean that a system needs to innovate, and sometimes innovation can be a bad thing too. And by the way, the fact you're sticking with this just 4 same party members throughout the game is actually really telling in this, since you ignore the actual innovations the game does offer, such as the technical attacks that you can pull off between the party members. For example, Morgana and On have a good synergy because if you can burn your enemies with On's fire attacks, you can actually take advantage of that with Morgana's wind skills on enemies that don't have weaknesses to wind type attack.
Persona 5, as your characters level up, they earn new abilities in combat, but almost always are just stronger versions of things you already have, with a few exception to passive abilities or a castable debuff.
In the arms of the angel.
Why would you keep Zyonga when you have Zeodyne, the objectively better attack, and pass up Matakaruja? That skill actually boosts all of your party's attack to dish out more damage! For someone who's saying physical attacks are great, why would you get rid of one of the best physical boosts in the entire game? Why do you even have shock boost? You don't even bring up status ailments in this section. Why even have a luck boost if you're just using Ryuji as a physical sweeper?
That make enemies that were immune to their attribute no longer have the immunity, leaving no room for meaningful choices since taking new abilities with higher numbers rather than keeping the old abilities is the right choice every time.
Apparently not, since you went against that notion with your own footage here.
There's no reason to keep Bufu once you have access to Bufula.
Then why the hell did you keep Zyonga when you had Zeodyne? What is your logic here? And before anyone gets on my case for saying, well, it's used to knock down weaker enemies, and my retort is, If you didn't over-level your party, you wouldn't have that issue at all.
There's even potential already in the game's mechanics to spice up the combat, like the different weather effects causing shadows and mementos to have different ailments. But since every weather effect is hard-coded to happen on specific days, coupled with the fact that this doesn't affect any shadows in main storyline palaces, they end up not having any real effect on gameplay.
Or, you know, you can inflict them yourself with your persona skills. Hello? Cvit?
The setup for combat with the stealth and ambush mechanic also wasn't very good.
I want to take a moment here to point out the text. Seeing the shadow through the wall, yet if you look down below that, you can see Joker looking through the doorway. I mean, it's not like his perspective matters on this, I guess. And you know what, I'm just gonna call it right here, because I kind of agree with his stealth segment, even though I find some of it to be really rudimentary. I mean, I don't even think it would consider to be a stealth game because it's just basically improving on the ambush system from Persona 4 and 3. Yep, that's the end of the section of combat. 12 minutes. Me to undertake if I ever come back to this massive video, and I'm sick of people trying to tell me that this is the best video on criticism with this game. It's not. Persona 5 is not a perfect game. I will never die on that hill. However, I think this is what people consider to be good criticism of the game, then I'm sorry, but I think we got different views on what good criticism actually is. And that's fine. But just don't tell me that it's a perfect video about this. And now that I put this out on the table, I want to thank you guys for getting us to 50k. It's been a long uphill battle against the oppressive YouTube, but we finally made that milestone. If you want me to cover more of this video, I'll make you guys a bet. We get to 75k subscribers, and I'll cover another segment from Cvit's video. Possibly the story beats, because that's where people seem to think that I failed in my regard with that. But, until then, thank you for watching, and remember to examine your fandom.